Can you win a Super Bowl in the offseason? Stephen Jones says no. We'll debate on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we are just 1 week away from the NFL draft. I have to ask, what's your routine or your traditions on draft day? Do you do anything special?
You know, food a little bit. I mean, I'm on the West Coast, right? So the draft actually starts kind of during the workday, technically. So it's technically a rush during the workday to get everything done, so that you can kick off maybe an hour or two early, get all your screens set up, and kind of get prepared and have everything in front of you by the time that the opening bell rings.
I really enjoy draft day for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I don't have to do a lot of work during the day because there's not a lot to do during that day. We're just waiting, right? There's really no podcasts that need to be recorded or anything like that. So every year I've been watching draft day in the morning just to get me excited and pumped up for the draft, and then to have a bunch of people over and watch. So I'm getting really excited. But we should get to some of your Twitter questions today. We have a good one, starting with some Stephen Jones talk. He wants to know, this is from at Jones's Babysitter. Again, great Twitter account. Can you win or lose a Super Bowl in the offseason? Stephen Jones, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, said, no, you cannot win a Super Bowl in the offseason. Do you agree?
Yes, because you can't. I mean, we can make us, we can twist the semantics around on this as much as we want, but the bottom line is that no, I mean, you can't. You can build the greatest.
Can you lose one in the offseason, though? Because I think you can.
I don't think you can lose it, but I think you can put yourself in an impossible position to win it, I guess, if that's the way you want to look at it. I mean, it's just, bottom line is that there just aren't any games in the offseason. So,
but
you can't.
We understand the point, right? Like,
I guess I understand the take a little bit.
If you don't do anything in free agency and you lose a bunch of talent and you have a bad draft, I think you could put yourself in a position where you don't even have a realistic chance to win the Super Bowl.
I think that that's not
we're
the
not
same
there.
thing as losing it. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what
we're not there now. I think you can make a case that the Cowboys haven't done enough to put themselves in a better position to win a Super Bowl, but I don't think what they've done this offseason eliminates the chance that they make the playoffs or are a contender.
I think we're talking about two different things here.
Sure.
We're talking about whether you can actually lose a Super Bowl in an offseason, which you can't, or whether we are disappointed with what the Cowboys have done this offseason, which obviously most of the fandom is, and I think we are as well. I also think that, again, to that second point, the biggest talent acquisition that the Cowboys, leverage is a week from today. So get these takes in before the draft shows up and the angles all change. But yeah, I think you can set yourself up to really help yourself or really hurt yourself depending on how good of an offseason you have. That's why they do player acquisition and they go through that whole process. But I just, again, like we go too far sometimes with these idioms and these sayings. Like you literally cannot lose the Super Bowl in the offseason. So, whatever semantic argument you want to make to kind of make that work, someone probably could. But I just think you could really help yourself. You could really hurt yourself. I think the games are obviously what decide that. And we've seen that the ball is oblong and it bounces in weird ways. And so trying to predict even a week before the games is difficult. Trying to predict 6 months before games even start is even further.
Yeah, I do think you can kind of lose a Super Bowl in the offseason, though, if you just don't acquire enough talent, if you're relying too much on guys staying healthy and not building up your depth. That is when I think you can get yourself in trouble. But to be clear, I have not loved what the Cowboys have done this offseason, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be a competitive team this year. I still think they should be the heavy favorite to win the NFC East. Now, that might be more of a indication on the other three teams in the division, but if you win your division, you're going to have a home playoff game, and who knows from that point, right? I just would have liked to see the Cowboys be a little bit more aggressive, but again, the draft is a week away. We really can't criticize anything until we get past that point.
Real quick, I just think the margins are small in the NFL, right? So you have to do your best to kind of make the most of those margins in order to kind of get that much better than the next team. Having said all that, if you have a starting quarterback of the ilk that Dak Prescott is, you're in the race. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like every season, I think you can obviously make those margins less or more, but depending on how you run your off season. But again, I think you're within striking distance. I think putting yourself completely out of the race is a multiple years process, in my opinion. Like you'd have to really take a hammer to your team.
If you have a quarterback that you believe is a top 12 option, you should be competitive. It's awfully hard to mess things up so badly where you're not competitive with a quarterback as long as they stay relatively healthy, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Is that it's tough. It's tough with a good quarterback to take yourself out of competition.
I want to get to the second part of his question that he had, but before we do that, let's tell you guys about Blue Nile. Are you looking for fine jewelry for that special woman in your life, but you're having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every single budget. On BlueNile.com, you can easily navigate through thousands of fine jewelry options at every single price point. And this Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Cowboys listeners will get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Make sure you use promo code Locked On. That is promo code Locked On. Plus, every single order is insured. It ships free. And it arrives in a discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, Landon, the next part of Jones's babysitter's question is there prospects that haven't been discussed enough, at least on this show, that would be a good fit for the Cowboys, like a late-round selection like Israel Makamu or Nashawn Wright, who's on the Cowboys' radar that hit certain thresholds that we haven't discussed enough?
Yeah, I mean, there always is. I think, I think there's guys that are a little bit later down that we've talked about, like the Tyquan Thornton, who's the Baylor
speedy
Baylor
receiver,
wide receiver.
Yep.
I think there's guys like who's that tight end that I think is a kind of a smaller school tight end with an unusual name that they were looking at. There are definitely guys that like kind of fit those thresholds that are fit the idea of the late round gamble on the athleticism, type of picks. I think that Marquise Bell probably fits that role.
Yep.
Just some of those guys who have interesting measurable and athletic traits that kind of fit what you're looking for at specific positions that maybe don't have, the tape that puts them in the top 2 days or even the beginning of the third day. I think those are the guys that you're kind of looking at. Who do you got?
I've got a couple. Cornerbacks. I just have a feeling the Cowboys are going to make it a yearly tradition to add a cornerback early on day 3 that has traits. And they're just going to keep picking these guys over and over and over again, hoping to find their next Trevon Diggs or maybe Richard Sherman like Dan Quinn did in Seattle. Martin Emerson, Mississippi State, 6'2", 201 pounds, 33.5-inch arms at the combine, 80-inch wingspan, ran a 4.53 40-yard dash. And the production is very, very good. 16 pass deflections in his career. You can go watch him on tape. He'll tackle. His length is, he plays really well in the SEC. I think that's somebody 4th, 5th round I could see them gambling on. Couple other later guys. We're talking about really, really late guys. Tariq Carpenter, a safety from Georgia Tech, 6'3", 230 pounds, ran a 4.47 40-yard dash with an 81-inch vertical. Led Georgia Tech in tackles. You can go watch him on tape. He basically plays like a weak side linebacker for them. That's probably somebody that you draft 6th, 7th round, undrafted free agents that you're hoping becomes a special team star. That's kind of what you're looking for here.
Yeah, guys who have athletic traits that maybe just like didn't jump out on film. Like someone like that, you could play a linebacker, you can play the box safety. He'll provide you with special teams. Guys that can come in, use their athleticism early on special teams while they're learning their native position at the NFL. And then, like by year 2, maybe by year 3, training camps, they start mixing in with some reps with the ones, and suddenly they're popping, right?
Yep.
And then now you're like, oh wow, maybe we've got something here. So those are the kind of gambles that you should take later in those rounds, because athleticism translates, and you're much more likely to have a hit with a guy that is in the later parts of the round because his tape doesn't look like he's a very developed player, but he has the athleticism, than the other way around, right? Like you don't want to take a non-athletic guy who's just all skill later in the round, because those guys don't have any ceiling, they don't have any room to grow. Right. So I think taking the athletes later on is always a good gamble, and hoping that you can develop, and even if you can't, maybe you get a very, very good special teams player.
In a 5th, 6th, 7th round UDFAs, the Cowboys are looking for 1 or 2 traits. For example, here's a guy that I know they like. I'm going to make sure I pronounce his name right. Tyrikis Tisdale from Ole Miss. Dan Quinn went down to Ole Miss's pro day. Obviously worked out Sam Williams, but another reason that he went down is to work out this kid. 6'5", 285 with 35.25-inch arms, 83-inch wingspan, and ran a 4.63 40-yard dash. I mean, in terms of arm length, wingspan, weight, SEC school, he hits a lot of things that Will McClay likes in a long shot. So, again, with all these 5th-round picks, there's really no difference between that and UDFAs. Could the Cowboys take a chance on somebody like this and put him on the practice squad for a year, and maybe down the road he's your DN5? Sure, why not?
Absolutely. And until then, he can be chasing down kickoffs, right?
Exactly.
If he gets made even active during the week. So
absolutely,
yeah, absolutely. Those are the kind of gambles you take.
All right, a couple more questions. Let's run through as many of these as possible. This one from Poncho. He wants to know, I am feeling like we are having a Raiders kind of first-round pick. Which player should we prepare for that we haven't talked about yet at 24? I don't know why you'd ever assume Raiders with this show, but Leda, any guesses?
So a guy that to be taken at 24 that we haven't spoken about yet.
Basically, where the national media would say it's a big reach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, with
Tyler Smith,
this is a reach. This is Sam Williams. What would happen? What would your thought be if the Cowboys just were like, Sam Williams at 24?
They know something that we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obviously a big reach, and especially or at least it would seemingly be a big reach. I would say that qualifies.
Ryman, offensive tackle from Central Michigan.
Bernard Raymond,
yeah.
Or are you talking about?
The offensive line we traded up for yesterday.
Yeah, I guess it wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't shock me, but
yeah. Because again, like he falls into that category of the Ty Smiths, where a guy that you think probably comes in and plays guard, but could play tackle for you eventually, right? Mm-hmm. I think if anything, really, we've kind of exhausted the positions that we're talking about, right? Like that, offensive line and wide receiver. It feels like we've talked about the first 2 full tiers of those guys. So I would go outside of those positions and say something like, when we talked about this guy, but like Devontae Wyatt, where it's like we've talked about him, but we haven't really, suggested the Cowboys take him at 24 because, obviously for all the reasons that we've talked about. But could he be a guy that they like more than we know and they want to take? Maybe. They don't normally do that with defensive tackles, but he's a pass rushing defensive tackle and one of the few pass rushing defensive tackles. So maybe he's a guy.
What about How about Quay Walker, who
Yeah,
a lot of
that's a good
people
one.
mock in the late first round, who the Cowboys actually had as one of their 35th. We just have not talked about him at all, but I've seen a lot of people, rank him as one of the top 2 linebackers. He's also very big, 6'4", 242 with 4.5 speed. I mean, it would surprise me, but it wouldn't be completely shocking.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you see a lot of people that are talking about him as linebacker 1, so
Mhm.
people really like Quay Walker. The Cowboys obviously are very interested in it there. I think that's a good spot, right? Because it's another position where, we had talked about linebacker at certain points in the first round. We obviously went through Dean, we went through
Mhm.
Lloyd, and all those folks. And Quay Walker kind of came onto the scene as a first round pick, or we were kind of seeing him as a first round pick after we had kind of had those
Mhm.
discussions about linebacker moved on. I think another position potentially that we have to at least think about is cornerback. So like maybe someone like Andrew Booth. Like, I know we have discussed the fact that we don't think that they'll do that, or at least I don't think they'll do that
Well,
because of the depth they have. But if they know something about Kelvin Joseph that we don't know,
sure.
or something else that's going on, that would be a pick that I think would potentially be worthy of the 24th pick, but is not someone that we have discussed a lot because we assume that they're not necessarily interested in taking a corner in the first round.
I'll give you another one in that same vein, right? How about Kyler Gordon? I heard back
Mm.
in January that the Cowboys really like Kyler Gordon. It didn't think much of it because of all the cornerback depth, but January is typically when you hear a lot of truths,
Some
right?
good
Teams aren't
information.
there's
Yeah.
no incentive to lie. And then you hear that he's invited to the NFL draft, which basically tells you he's going in the first round, right? His teammate Trent McDuffie, who I know a lot of draft Twitter has high, didn't get invited. So Gordon is the guy that's probably expected to be drafted higher, played in the slot at Washington, super freak athlete. You know, I think he's probably going to be a late first round pick. Would it be completely shocking if Dallas just picked him and said, you know what? Even if we have Kelvin Joseph, we can play him in the slot. We're going to probably move on from Anthony Brown and Jordan Lewis down the line anyways. Here you go.
Yeah, I mean, look, and maybe they have something in place for a trade, if they
Sure.
like those guys. If they targeted Gordon, or if they think that he's a pick, I wouldn't be surprised if, as part of that plan, they started calling around to say, "Hey, you interested in Anthony Brown at a pretty cheap price? You interested in Jordan Lewis?"
Or maybe they have this philosophy too, and I don't know what they're thinking at cornerback, but maybe the plan is just to never pay a cornerback elite money. They didn't do it with Byron Jones, right? Will they do it with Trevon Diggs? When Diggs is up for his contract in 2 years, are they going to want to give him $20 million? My guess is yes, but if you kind of look back at the history of Dan Quinn and his defenses, you don't really pay those cover 3 corners a ton of money.
It's something worth considering. Maybe it's
Yeah,
just a reload situation in corner.
maybe. All right, let's get to some more questions. This one from Payson. He said they brought in Jordan Davis for a 30 visit. Is he a guy you trade up 3 or 4 spots to get, or only if he falls to you at 24?
I think for me, I would probably only if he comes to 24. I think not that I don't think he's worth it. It's just that I feel like the Cowboys have a lot of needs, and if you're going to trade up in the first round, you better be trading up for a spot that is a pretty glaring need, where
A
need and
need
value
and a
really
money
mix.
position, right?
Yeah, defensive tackle is not a position that they value very highly in general. And I think
Mhm.
that Jordan Davis is a rare player. I mean, I'm not putting him Vita Vea level, but I mean, I think that doesn't. You don't have to be Vita Vea to be the rare player.
Do you like him better than
Uh,
Derek Brown? Now, I know you're an Auburn homer, so this is a tough question, but do you like him better than
no,
Derek
it's
Brown?
not. It's not a tough question. I do like him better
Okay,
than
that's fair. So do I.
Derek Brown, because I think that he can provide more in the pass game than Derek Brown.
I
I think he actually is more of a pocket pusher. More of an athlete. I mean, I think
But
that's
that's the
pretty
thing is
clear.
Brown was not a great athlete.
No, no, and Brown was a dominant player for a team that I root for, but yeah, I don't necessarily
I still like
think he's
Derek
better
Brown a
prospect.
little bit, though. I
Yeah,
know he
I
hasn't been
don't
panned out in
don't
Carolina.
I don't hate him, and I'm surprised that it's turned out the way it has so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that this is a better play. So no, I think that owning and you and I have discussed this quite a bit. It feels like, and I tend to agree with. I think what we all agree with is that I like him at 24 a lot. I would run to make the pick, even if there were
Absolutely.
good wide receivers and offensive linemen there. I would make that pick. Not enough to trade up to lose an extra pick. I think that's a step too far.
I mean, if you're trading up 1 or 2 spots and it's only costing you like a 5th
It
round
depends on the
pick,
cost, right? Yeah.
right? If it gets to be where you're giving up, I'd say a top 4 round pick, that's when I'm probably out, right?
Yeah.
And I just don't see the Cowboys moving up from 24 to 18 to go grab really a one technique. I mean, or nose tackle one. I don't see that, but if he's there at 24, sure, why not? I think we have similar thoughts there. All right, next question. One's from Zach. Aside or after Sky Moore and George Pickens in round 2, what wide receiver could you see the Cowboys targeting if they go offensive line in round 1? We talked about this a lot. We do not love the options in day 2 at receiver, but is there a guy for you that you like more than most in that 2nd, 3rd round range?
I honestly think the first question is who's going to be there in the 2nd and 3rd round range, because the more we do this, the more it feels like it's random, right? It feels like, sometimes Jahan Dotson makes it, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes Pickens gets there to 56. Sometimes he's taken at 28.
I would say you can bet on 9 receivers being gone before the Cowboys pick at 56.
I think that makes sense. I think that seems fair, So if that's the case, then I mean, like what you want to go through them real quick? Wilson,
Sure,
Olave, Burks.
If we're running through
London.
Dave Brugler's receivers after the top 9, you're talking about Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama, John Mechie, Alabama, Wan'Dale Robinson, Calvin Austin, Khalil Shakir, Danny Gray.
I like Calvin Austin and Khalil Shakir better than the rest of those guys. I don't know that I'm taking them.
Yeah, I would take him at 56.
No, I wouldn't either. No. I would trade up maybe from 88 to get out Calvin Austin or Khalil Shakir. But I don't have any interest in taking Mechie at 56. I have no interest in taking Tolbert necessarily, but I don't think the Cowboys would either, taking Tolbert at 56. Yeah, I mean, honestly, even Watson, I think would be rich at 56. So
I think it's rich at 56, but I don't think we're gonna have to worry about it because it's
I don't think so.
Much higher.
Absolutely not. No,
I agree with you. I like Calvin Austin and Khalil Shakir a lot, but I kind of think both of those guys profile as number 3 receivers in the NFL. However, I think they can both be high-end number 3 receivers in the league, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I did a draft last night with some of the Blogging the Boys guys, and we had this debate, right? We missed our round of wide receivers, and we got to the kind of end of the 2nd, and we had to figure out what we were going to do in order to get our wide receiver. And it's like, to me, Calvin Austin and Shakir are both guys who are like you said, like they're wide receiver 3s, but I feel like those are the 2 guys who could come in as wide receiver 3s and play that role immediately, to the point where they could have an impact, right?
Yes.
Is that how you feel as well?
Yeah, I think they're guys that could come in and be 500, 600-yard receivers right away for you, right? And there's not going to be a lot of, inconsistencies to their game. But again, neither of those guys are going to get to 88. So if you need to trade up from 88 to 72, I can stomach that. I just 56 is pretty rich. You better be getting a player at 56 that you have ranked inside your top 40 or so. At least that's my thought process on it.
My general thought process is that I don't want to pick at 56. I want to either trade me up or trade me back. I just don't like any of my picks when I get there usually, or at least consistently don't like what I land on there. I would much rather go up and get a guy or come back and get some extra picks. But that area right at 56 is kind of a no man's land for what you're specifically looking for.
100% agree. All right, one more quick break to tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, including league reviews and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting, the playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Next question from Zach. Is it more likely that the Cowboys trade up to grab a player they really want in round 1, or more likely that they'll trade down to add more picks?
What was the trade up for what? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Just
first part of the
trade
question.
up to grab a player they really want.
I think it's more likely that they trade back. I mean, just because I think in order for you to like feel the need to pull the trigger on going up, like it's got to fall right.
Yeah.
It's got to you got to have somebody that's a target that falls to a range that you feel comfortable attacking. Let's say it's, again, the name we keep throwing out here, right? Let's say it's Cross, right? Let's say Cross makes it to, I don't know
14?
how, but yeah, well, 14, that makes sense, I guess. But like, I can't imagine he gets past that next row, right? Of Philly, New Orleans twice, I think each. There's no way. New Orleans definitely will want to take Cross, and if they don't, then I feel very certain that Philly likely will.
Yeah.
So I would say if you wanted him, you probably got to go up to where Houston is. I can't remember off the top of my head. 13 or 14. Yeah, and go get that. Go get him there. But that's got to fall just right in order for that to happen. And then on top of that, you got to make a trade that Houston is happy with, because they're coming way, way down. I just think it's much more likely you get to 24 and you've got a couple of different guys that you like, and you could get an offer from a team that's looking to jump Green Bay, or a team that's looking to, kind of get ahead of some of these other guys to pick maybe the last receiver, or maybe, one of these offensive linemen. And you feel good enough about the idea that if you trade back a couple spots, one of those, 5 or 6 guys that you think are left on your board at 24 will still be there.
All right, let's play a quick game. Let's look at some of Dane Brugler's top prospects and see if you would trade up to number 13 or 14.
Okay, I like this.
Texans drafted 13, Ravens drafted 14. Both of those teams love to trade, so I think they'd be willing. Let's run through the names. Some of these are obvious: Hutchinson, Aquanu, Neal, Walker, Gardner. All those are yeses, correct?
Obviously, yes.
Okay. Kyle Hamilton.
No.
I agree. Charles Cross, yes.
Yes.
Kayvon Thibodeau, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we're at 7 players right now. Devin Lloyd.
No.
Okay. Garrett Wilson.
That's a special situation, honestly, because I think the player, I would say maybe, but the problem is that if Garrett Wilson isn't being taken by 14, what's the rest of the wide receiver board look like? That's what I would say, is that, like, if Garrett Wilson's still available, who else is still available, and will they make it down to 24?
I agree. Jermaine Johnson, Florida State.
No.
I love
the position. The position would indicate yes, right? But I don't view him as in that Thibodeau Walker.
Okay. Fair enough.
Tier. Yeah.
I don't view him in that tier either, but you are getting a guy that I really like. But if it was a position they had a little bit more of a need for, I would say yes, but
maybe.
But not.
It's not a hard no, right? It's just like the circumstances aren't quite enough for me to feel like.
I think he need to get to like 16 or 17 for me to start thinking about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Trent McDuffie, no. Jameson Williams.
I would be okay with it, but people are going to be so mad, because I have a lot of faith in Williams. Like, I think that he is going to be a star in this league. You just don't find receivers that have that kind of speed, that have his skill to play the position as well. Like, that's really the hard thing to find, and he has that. So, but I think trading up for a guy that just blew out an ACL in the national championship game, that's definitely going to raise some eyebrows.
Yeah. All right. So that's 8 players that we would consider trading up for. Derek Stingley. My guess is no. I just don't get the sense they probably are going to trade up for a corner.
And they've done that before, and for an LSU corner that they thought was a sure thing, and it didn't work out.
Injury problems.
Yeah, maybe not.
He also doesn't hit a lot of the thresholds that Dan Quinn and Will McClay like. So
short arm.
Even though he's a really good player, I just don't see them giving up multiple picks to
It's
go.
a lot. Yep, I agree.
This one's interesting. Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa.
Oh man, no, I definitely would not. Maybe they would.
I think they might. I think they like Trevor Penning quite a bit.
I don't think we have to worry about it. Fortunately enough, honestly.
No, I don't think you have to worry about it. Chris Olave. This was an easy yes for you. I know. I love Olave.
I don't know that it's an easy yes. I don't know that it's a yes. I love Olave too, but I just feel like honestly, like tackle and corner, if you needed them, are really the positions I feel the most comfortable about. A defensive end too, because the guys you talked about are top 5 players. But I love Olave at 24. I don't love trading up all that way to get Olave.
Yes, I agree.
But at the same time, I will say this: I can 100% understand trading up to get your wide receiver. I won't be mad if they do it. I wouldn't necessarily do it, but having seen how these wide receiver boards fall, like to go and get the guy that you want to just cut through all the BS and not have to worry about getting through all that, I can understand that and feeling like you needed to make a play there. I just think that it's a lot more palatable if you just let him fall a little bit further and trade up maybe 2 or 3 spots.
Yeah, I
right?
agree.
That's a long way to go.
Couple more names: George Karlaftis, Tyler Linderbaum, Dax Hill, Traylon Burks, Zion Johnson, Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis. I'm assuming all those are no's.
All those are no's. We didn't mention Drake London, but I would say
yeah.
that he's also probably a no. I mean,
Yeah.
Like similar to Olave, I would say.
Yeah. So we're talking about only, 8 guys that the Cowboys could potentially trade up for. And of those 8, 5 are going to be drafted in the top 7.
Yeah.
And probably, 4 might be the first 4 picks of the draft.
And that's, again, it goes back to the question, like, what's just the odds-on favorite? Look, the odds-on favorite is to trade down simply because there's more scenarios where that's palatable, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a very random throw of the dice that you even get a scenario where you would want to trade up, right? And then you can consider whether they would trade up or not, whether they would give up the assets.
All right. 1 week until the NFL draft. Your prediction for the Cowboys at number 24 is?
Kenyon Green, I think. I've kind of gone back and forth on this a lot. It feels like he's going to be available there. I wouldn't even be surprised if it was a small trade back and then Kenyon Green.
I'll go Traylon Burks, wide receiver, Arkansas. I've been sticking with that one for a couple months now. I feel like it's still the best fit in terms of what the Cowboys want at receiver. I think he'll be there. That's my gut call. I hope you're right. I kind of would rather have Green. I think it'd be a little bit more fun. All right, that is it for today's show. Tomorrow, we have a special episode of the show. Chad Ryder from NFL.com, formerly NFL Draft Scout, is going to be on the show to talk about this draft class, talk about some fits for the Cowboys, some whispers that he's hearing. So make sure you guys are tuning in for that. Continue to check us out on YouTube. You guys have been crushing it for us on YouTube.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, tons of new subscribers, tons of views. We really thank you. Check us out on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys right back here tomorrow.